Okay, we're gonna get started here. Hello, my name is Nicole Renhel, and thank you so much for attending or watching this little webinar that I put together called Things to Think About When Moving to a Different Country. And it's presented by me. My name again is Nicole Renhel. I live in Costa Rica. I've lived here for 7 years through a pandemic and also a divorce. Just to give you a little background, I moved here 7 years ago with my family of four. My children at that age were just turning 5 and also 7 years old, and with my husband. And then 4 years ago, my husband and I separated and divorced. We both still live here in Costa Rica. He actually lives just a few blocks away from me. We co-parent, and our children go back and forth between both of our homes. In this time period, our children have gone to two different schools here, and we live in the Tamarindo area of Costa Rica, which is on the Pacific side or the west side of Costa Rica on the beach. And I was a full-time stay-at-home mom when we moved here. I did a little bit of freelancing, but due to our divorce, I became a freelance writer and content strategist, worked for a company full-time, and then have transitioned out of that to do freelancing full-time. And I'm also a love and intimacy coach. So that's a little bit about me. You'll hear a little bit more about my story as we go along with this. And again, this is just a way for me to share my own experience, but also the experience that I've talked with hundreds of other families that have either moved to Costa Rica or around the world, and really be able to share some really good, thoughtful things, tidbits that you can think of if you're considering moving to a different country. And again, I'm not a professional. This is not like something that I do professionally. It's just something that I wanted to do because I get asked about it all the time. So I figured, why not put it together? So I love this quote by Anthony Bourdain, which is, if I'm an advocate for anything, it's to move as far as you can, as much as you can, across the ocean or simply across the river, walk in someone else's shoes, or at least eat their food. It's a plus for everybody. And I think that this is really key in deciding to move to a different country. You are completely moving and changing your whole life. And it's not just about changing your life for a job or college or something like that. Like you sometimes making it for those choices, of course. But for the sake of this talk, I'm mostly going to assume that most everybody that's watching this, it's a choice. And but that's not to say that if you are in the area that you are having to move because of a job or you know studying or military or something like that, a lot of the information I can provide you will still be very useful and really helpful. So just to give you some numbers, and this is all US based because I moved from Texas, from the US, and I think most of my audience is US based. There is about 8.7 to 9 million people, US citizens across the globe. And that's non-military living in all over the world. And most of that is permanent or long-term tourism. There is about 229,000 military and DoD civilian personnel living abroad as well. And that doesn't include their families. So those family members are included in that US citizens across the globe, the 8.7 to 9 million. And then I've given you a breakdown here by age group, and then also top countries for US citizens. So Canada And Mexico actually was really surprising. I did this talk a little over a year ago, and these numbers were completely different. So I think because when I did that, there wasn't numbers out of the pandemic yet. And so now we have pandemic, post-pandemic numbers. And so these numbers have completely changed since pre-pandemic or during the pandemic. I don't think anybody was really doing a lot of moving overseas in 2020. I also want to point out that all the sourcing for this and some other sources that I have for information is at the end of this presentation. So you will have those sources if you want them. So really what the first thing that you think of is why do you move overseas? So of course we kind of already talked about this, that these are some of the most commonly documented, but like military, obviously that's kind of your job, or career, like you get a career opportunity, maybe even education, maybe you move to go to university or higher education in another country, be closer to family. Um, and closer to family could be two different experiences. It could either be immigrants who go back to their country of origin to be closer to their family, or it could be people who move closer to other family members living abroad. So like, a grandmother that's lived in the United States all of her life, and then her child and family, family members go, and so then she moves to be closer to them. Obviously, there's love, falling in love with somebody and moving where they are. Retirement is a really big thing. A lot of people move after they retire. Fleeing the country, and fleeing the country, of course, could be for political, social reasonings. There's lots of different reasons why people might flee the country that they live in. And then, of course, downsizing, sometimes just, trying to say, like, hey, I want to get out of, the big urban lifestyle that I live in. I want to live in a quaint little place, in Italy or something. So it's just really downsizing. And then another one that happens very, very often is just traveling someplace and deciding never to leave. And that happens very often too. And again, I want to say that going back to those numbers before the 8.7 to 9 million, that includes those like kind of what's considered long-term tourist, or somebody like that basically decides like, oh, I'm going to stay here for 6 months to a year or something. So then I just want to implore you and ask you, what is your reason and why are you interested in moving? And again, for the sake of this talk specifically, I'm going to use the idea that it's a choice, right? So choosing one of those reasons before. Um, but then how do you also turn this into a reality, right? So obviously there's all the reasons. So, and these are the reasons why you like things that you can think of that help you make a decision on which country to move to, right? So you have your family is there again, like moving towards a place, a family. Maybe you're looking at healthcare and you want to have affordable healthcare, or you have specific healthcare needs, and you know that this country provides amazing healthcare for that. And also thinking about like emergency healthcare or even pandemic healthcare at this point. Since we're past a pandemic here. Also looking at visa and residency and what that means for that country. Each country has different visa and residency requirements. And so when you're looking at a country, trying to figure out what's going to be, how easy it is going to be to live there, and for how long can you live there without some legal implications. And then climate. Some people want to move to the mountains. Some people want to move to the beach. Some people want to have four seasons, right? And so trying to figure out if the country or the place that you want to live in is going to fit the climate aspects, right? If that's really important to you. Also, business opportunities. A lot of people decide that they want to move to a different country and start a business. So, really finding out in the country that you might be interested in, or maybe the business you specifically want to move to, what countries are good, or what businesses are good, or how easy it is going to be to either start up a business or buy a business right, right there, a turnkey business. And then, a living situations. What is the living going to be like? Is it going to be affordable for you in the way that you want and the lifestyle that you want? And then also travel, just kind of thinking about traveling not only back to the country that you move from, which again, I'm going to assume it's the United States or Canada, um, but also traveling around wherever you move to. Is that something that's important to you? So there's so many reasons and options for people to decide to move, but then also try to figure out where to move, right? These are things of where do I want to find? So here again, already said that for the US, popular destinations are Canada and Mexico. But overall, throughout the world, these are some popular destinations. So Southeast Asia, Central America, and Europe. Of course, hotspots are Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Mexico, Canada, Costa Rica, Germany, Portugal, Spain, Switzerland. And each of these countries have very different reasons as to why individuals are drawn to move there. And so it's just really starting to hone in on what your reasons are and why you're deciding to make this choice to move. And my suggestion is really come up with like maybe three or four that are just like your non-negotiable reasons that like this country or this location has to hit these. And then start from there. And that will help you dwindle down where to actually move. So, in my life, in my instance, our reasons were that we wanted Spanish speaking. My ex husband is Mexican, and so our children are Mexican American first generation. So, it's very important that we raise them in a Spanish speaking environment, or at least allow them to learn Spanish, but then also just wanted to give them at least some exposure to the Latino culture. And so that was very important to us. Then, because we had young children, like I said, they were 5 and 7, we were really concerned about education because they were just starting their educational journey off. So they were in elementary school. And at that point, all of their education in the United States had actually been in Spanish. They had gone to a Spanish immersion school. And so we really wanted to keep, Spanish in the school, but also introduce English in case we wanted to change back into the US school system or go to a European system, etc. One of the things is that in a lot of countries, there are a lot of international schools, and some of them only use English or only use French, or it's depends on where you're at as to what language they are, but they are considered international schools, and so you just have to like figure that out. And so we wanted an elementary school, good education was important to us. The next one was safe drinking water. Again, I had young children, and children just get dirty and they touch things all over the place. And I just did not want to have to worry about constantly being like, oh, don't touch that. Oh, we can't wash our hands with that water. Like don't drink that glass because it has ice in it and things like that. So that was something that was very important. And then safety. safety around playtime and also around traveling. I at that time and even now, um, travel a lot with my children by myself and go and do activities, with them. And so I wanted to make sure that I felt safe, not only as myself, as a woman, but also as a mother with my young children in the country that we were in. And so, again, what we did is we came up with these four kinds of top tier things, and we just started to look around. And within a couple of days, we narrowed it down, and we had looked at Mexico. Of course, because my ex-husband was from Mexico, Costa Rica. We had friends that either owned property here or vacationed here, like for months at a time, or Panama, because Panama is connected to the United States in a lot of ways, especially like the US dollar. And in the end, we decided on Costa Rica. And the crazy part about this is that we actually made this whole journey within two months. Basically, my ex-husband came home and we decided, and then 2 months later, we were here. We sold everything and moved to Costa Rica. One of the things that I love about this country that I find from talking to so many expats or immigrants from all over the world is that there is just this sense of community and like a sense of just taking some time to step back and time and allowing your children to really get uncomfortable sometimes. And so like here, we would like put them in the back of a pickup truck and drive them to the beach, and would get so scared, like, we have to be in our car seats, and we are like, no, you don't have to be in your car seats anymore. But then still having like beautiful celebrations and holidays, and again making lots of friends, and what I call our family that supports us, with locals and people that are from all over the world. And here in Costa Rica, especially, we just have the most glorious sunsets here in Tamarindo. And so really, like, that's what it is. Like, if you were making a choice again to move countries, it's really just an easy two-step process. You find your reason, and then you find your country, and you move. That's it. I mean, yeah, that's it, right? I'm kidding. That's not it. There's a lot more that goes on in there. So let me break down some more things to help give you some guiding factors into finding that country, once you figure out those reasons, right? Like once you figure out those reasons. So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things to think about is visas and residency. So, every country is different on how they handle this. And of course, like the EU has its overarching visa for multiple countries, right? And it's really about how long do you think you're going to live there, and what you want to do in that country as well. So if you really do want to, have longevity and maybe get into the health system, or buy a property or buy a business, then looking into how that's viable when it comes to your visa or residency. Um, and, or can you just kind of go under the radar under a visa, renewing visa? That's actually what we did for the first many years of living here in Costa Rica, because it is difficult to get your residency. Is we would end up, they, at the time we moved here, you had a 90-day visa. So every 90 days, we would leave the country, we would go up to Nicaragua, just cross the border, get our passport stamped, and come right back. Sometimes we would stay in Nicaragua, or we would go down to Panama, or we'd go back to the US or Mexico. But it was just every 90 days. And you didn't even have to stay away. You just did it 24, not even 24 hours. You just walked across and came back. But other countries, like in the EU, you have a certain amount of days that you can be in the EU, and then you have to be so many days outside of the EU. So if you're wanting to stay someplace for a long period of time, you need to figure out what the legal requirement is of that and if that's even allowable. And then what is residency and what does that mean? How does that look for you? Every country is different. Some countries won't allow you to even become a resident unless you have like lineage there, like bloodlines, or unless you invest so much dollars in a business or a home or even just in banking. um, some it's just like, okay, just show us that you have reoccurring income. So it just really depends, and that is country by country. So it's really just you have to start to look at all these little nuances as you're looking into the different countries that you're looking at. Work and income. So, with work and income, of course, it depends on if you are going to work or if you or any of your family members are going to need to work or make income. Some countries do not allow you to work, physically work in that country. Like that's how Costa Rica is. It is very, very hard and difficult to get a job here in Costa Rica in person or like even online for a Costa Rican company. You have to have a very special skill set and they have to apply for a work visa for you. And so, just knowing that some countries are like that. Other countries are fine if you get hired someplace and you're a foreigner. And then also, if you are going to like continue working in the United States, of course, understanding what implications that is with, your company or the tax implications, which I'll talk to about that in just a second. And just understanding all of that. Again, lawyers, just making sure that you understand how the law is in this country, how it protects you as, again, a foreigner, or how it protects your property. If you're buying something, and how to hire lawyers to help you with like maybe your visa or your residency or any big purchases like homes, like do you even need one? Just really understanding those sort of big picture items for this country that you're about to move into. And then taxes, taxes is a big one, especially if you are like a US citizen or even Canadian. Are you going to be working? And if you are, how is your income going to be taxed? And there are in the United States, there are a couple of different tax credits and exclusions that you can get, which is really helpful. There's a foreign earned income exclusion and a foreign tax credit, which they both have their different nuances. And like in some countries, they have like a tax, what's it called? A tax um, connection with the country that you're moving to. And so you might not have to pay taxes in both countries, or you might have to pay taxes in both countries, even if you're not working in that country. So really understanding how taxes are working there. And then, of course, medical care. And this is especially important if you are maybe retiring or you have a family. If you or a family member has some sort of medical, special needs medical situation that you need, just understanding how the medical care system, how close is it to go to an emergency room? What about specialists if you need to see that? What kind of insurance do you need to get? Health insurance, or do you even need health insurance in the United States anymore? Can you let that go? Can you only have insurance in the country that you're moving to, etc.? So there's a lot of different things to think about with all of that. And then, of course, finances. Finance is a big one. So, just making sure that if you want, can you get a bank account in this country? And how does that work? And, what is the transfer situation from, your country to this new country? And how does that look? What are the banking fees involved in that? How are you going to do your daily expenditures? Do you really need a bank account in that country for expenditures if you're not going to own a business or own a property, etc.? For us personally, we use a bank account and a credit card that doesn't charge us for any foreign transaction fees or ATM fees. So basically, I go to the grocery store or I go to the ATM, and it's just like I do in Texas. I don't get any extra fees because of our banking in the US. I know that, American Express offers something, Chase, that's what we use. There's a couple of other credit card banking, not just card, but banking institutions that will work with you in that. And so definitely looking that up and seeing what would work for your lifestyle and your situation. And then, with large purchases, like I mentioned before about the banking and the large purchases, just how do you make those? Like, can you just transfer something from your US or Canadian bank account into um, the bank account in that country of whoever you're buying something from, or do you need a bank account? And, obviously, how easy is it to get that bank account? Um, like funny story is that when we moved here and we had to buy a car, we had been trying and trying with our bank to do transfers, and it was just becoming such a nightmare. So we basically we only had a $500 limit on our ATM. Card at that point. Now it's more than that. But we ended up having to go to the bank for like multiple days, multiple days. Oh my gosh, it was like the craziest thing. Just every day, just go to the bank and pull out $500 and 20s. We went to the lawyer to do the exchange. And I mean, they basically weighed the money because there was so much money. It was like easier to weigh it than it is to like count it out. I mean, they did also count it out, but like it was like gigantic stack of like cash. It was crazy. Um, and then also just emergency money. So, having enough cash on hand in not only US dollars, but also in the currency that of the country. And this comes from my father. My father lived overseas for the first 16 years of my life. I was actually born overseas. My mom moved back to the US when I was 3, but my father lived over there, and he's had to flee multiple countries and had to, get himself out of some sticky situations. And he has always instilled in with me, like, make sure that you have enough emergency cash. And he says that the best way, especially if you're living overseas, is to make sure that you have enough cash on hand to go to the airport and buy plane ticket, like one of the most expensive plane tickets for every person in your family. Um, and also money to bribe people if you need to. So just keep that in mind. And I know that we live in a tech world with credit cards now, but still cash is always something. And again, keep cash in US dollars in large denominations as well as small denominations. And then also in the currency that in the country. And same thing, kind of keep a variety of different bills, just depending on the situation. Another thing to really think about when moving, and finding the actual location. So, like, maybe you figured out, like, maybe the country, and now you're like kind of tuning it down a little bit more. Um, do you want to live like in a rural situation, or do you want to live like in a more urban situation? Do you want to have like the bustling city, or do you want to be beachside with nobody around and like in a little villa, or do you want it to have like a huge ranch with workers or whatever? So really trying to figure out, like where you want to be, and also like is culture a big thing for you? Do you want to have access to the arts and museums and parks and things like that, and outdoor spaces to go and do things with? Are you okay where there's just not a lot of that around? And then, of course, housing styles and just understanding that there's such a variety of housing styles all over the world, and they are not the same as the US, of course. And so just understanding the different types of housing styles that's in the country that you're looking at, and trying to figure out what you want. Do you want to have more of a condo situation? Do you want to have a single family home? Do you want to live in more like a little like village where there's small houses all next to each other? Just, really trying to figure out how that feels for you. And then, looking for that in the country that you're looking for. And then, of course, do you want to rent? Do you want to buy, or do you want to build? Coming out of the pandemic, there's been a huge influx of people leaving their countries and coming to different destinations, and Costa Rica is one of them. And the amount of people that I've seen that have come to buy or build a home has just like quadrupled since before the pandemic. And I just, my biggest thing with that, my biggest suggestion is, because I've seen it now 7 years, hundreds of families, hundreds of people, is I really highly suggest that you rent for the first year. You find your place, you find your city or whatever, your destination, and you find some place that you can affordably rent and just live there. Go through a whole year, a whole 4 seasons or 2 seasons, depending on where, this country or this location is, and really living with the people, living with the environment, living with the social structure and all the things that you have to pay and do before you really invest in buying or building. Even if you're thinking to buy or build as a investment home to do a rental, I still just highly suggest trying to make yourself just try to put a little break on there and live there for a little bit of time, so you can really see how the environment and the culture is going to be for you. Because a lot of times it's not what you expect, because you've only been there for a short period of time, or you only read about it online and it sounds beautiful. In Costa Rica, we are the blue zone, and, top 5 places in the world, and, things like that. And I have seen plenty of people come here and immediately regret their decision. So again, that's just my own personal kind of thoughts on that. Another thing to think of is your babies, whether it's children or animals. And this is a really big deciding factor for a lot of people. Like I said, it was definitely a huge thing for us when we moved here to consider our children, considering schools. What kind of school do you want to put them in? Public school or private school? Is that even accessible? Is that affordable for you to even put them in private school if that's something you want? And, is the schooling going to be something that they could continue on after they leave this time in this country? Activities, do you feel comfortable with the amount of offerings of activities, or is it not enough? Maybe you have a child that really is great at gymnastics and is going to be like the next Simone Biles, right, or something. And so, is there gymnastics for them to get that, avenue of activity out? Or is that just not as important to you anymore? And of course, safety, just making sure that you feel safe with your children. And that includes, just like random things, like we moved here with car seats. And within, I think, a few weeks, we stopped using them. We took them out of our car because nobody used car seats. And everybody was just like, why are you using car seats? This is so complicated. Um, we were like, okay, do what the locals do. And so we did. Um, what kind of community is there? I will say that in a lot of countries and a lot of locations, there's always going to be a Facebook group or a Reddit group that you can go to start to make some community before you move and kind of test the waters and see kind of what the temperature of the people are there. Maybe start to reach out to some people to ask them direct questions, and maybe start to create and nurture some of those relationships if you want. And then, of course, cultural events, just trying to figure out respectfully what are the holidays, but also what's the children's involvement in the holidays, and how do kids get integrated into the community, and in the cultural events, because kids, for the most part, everyone that I've talked to that moves with their children, they want their children to have some sort of sense of community and cultural experience of living in a different country. So really making sure that that country is going to serve that desire and that need. And then animals. Animals is definitely like people get really attached to their babies, right? They're animals, they're fur babies, they're fluff babies, they're scaly babies. So making sure that you can even transport them in, bringing them in and out, and what the regulations are, what kind of requirements does it cost, or what kind of requirements are there, and how much does it cost to import and to move your animal back and forth, right? Especially if it's like a emotional support animal, or one that can be go in the cabin with you. Right now there's a big thing about like you can't travel with animals in the cargo area, especially to like Costa Rica. And so there's like private charter planes that basically bring in loads of animals for their owners at certain times of the month. And it's costly. I have a friend and she is working on bringing her dog, who she just returned to the US. Now she's, coming back. She's already preparing to come back in like December or something to travel with her dog. And it's costing over $1,000 just to get all the paperwork and everything that she needs to travel. So it can be very costly, and just, to be aware of that, if it's something that you want to do, then just, really make sure that you understand that. And then, of course, medical care, just checking and making sure that your animal can get the medical care that it deserves while it's in whatever new country you're moving to. And just housing, like if you do rent, will they allow you to bring your animals with you? Is that going to be something feasible? I mean, like, I know in the United States, a lot of people won't rent to pit bull owners, or won't allow them to be in the neighborhood. Even, I think, is there some neighborhoods that don't allow that. So really making sure that you know the laws around whatever animal you have, and then also just taking into consideration the climate, and what kind of climate there is, and if this is going to be a conducive environment for your animal. So I have a funny story because when we moved, we had some dogs, and due to a couple of different extenuating circumstances with both of them, one of them was a new dog, and it kept snapping at my child. So we were, or my children. So we were already looking at possibly rehoming her, and then the other one was so old and was starting to have some problems. So we decided to rehome both of them before moving to Costa Rica, and which is devastating in a lot of ways. And so we told our children that we would get a fish. I did not know how hard it was to find a fish in the area of Costa Rica. It took me like months and hours of driving to Liberia, which is like an hour or so away, and going to all these different pet stores. Anyway, and it ensued. They died. We had to find more. And yes, it was a whole ordeal. And thankfully, now those fish have moved on to a school and living their happy life at another school. More details. Okay, again, these are all situational details that is unique on where you move. But of course, transportation, how are you going to move around? Like, are you going to buy a vehicle? Are you just going to use public transportation? Is it even easy to use public transportation? Just really figuring that out. Also connections, like how will you make friends, again, going back to the children, kind of building community and connections, like, just is there activities in that area that appeal to you, that you can actually maybe make some friends, or is there something that you can do to really start to grow your friendship and connections there? Do you want to be more with foreigners, or do you want to be more with locals? And how do you do that? And, really start to search in yourself and figure that out. Your phones and technology, will your phone actually work in that country? Will you need to get a new SIM card? Can you use, an international data plan? Will that be costly? Just depends on what you have already and then what you're looking for long term. One of the great things is that I have an app, and it's called Text Now, and it is an app on my phone, and I have my own dedicated phone number, and I can receive text messages, and I can make phone calls to the US and Canada. And I pay like $10 a year or something. It's ridiculously cheap and inexpensive, and I love it. I can't text like photos or videos, which is fine. I use WhatsApp, which is an app that is used across the world for that. But otherwise, it helps me to be able to doctor's appointments, or, I don't know, take care of banking things, etc., in the US while living here. Also, diet and food. Like, obviously, if you have some sort of dietary needs, you are a family member, and or maybe you're just kind of prone to not like a certain food, making sure, obviously, that the place that you're moving to is going to be able to provide you with enough options and ability to, feed yourself and have a healthy lifestyle that you want in whatever way you want there. And then, of course, like mail, bills, etc. So, what do you need to do in the US to like close out everything, all of the things that you don't need to pay for? And then what do you need to open up in the new country? And even can you do that? And then with your mail, the big thing with mail is like, where's your mail going to go to in the US? You're still going to have to get some mail, right? Like either your banking stuff or taxes, or, just there's still like investment things, retirement stuff. There's always going to be something that you need a mailbox for. You always need a mailing address. So different people do different things. I use my father's address, and he just opens up my mail. Basically in those 2 months that we left, I just started going through every day. I'd get the mail and just sit down and, unsubscribe, opt out of everything, canceled all of our magazines, etc. And then you know did the forwarding address to my father's account or my father's house. You can also do there's post office or postal companies that will take your mail and scan it. And you can agree to either have them open it or they'll forward it someplace else. And so there are companies like that that will do that. And then your will and estates, just making sure that you know that you have everything in place for your will and your estates in case anything happens is really important. You really want to make sure that you have that all in line, and also that you know legally what would happen in that country that you're moving to. So do you need like your real will? Can you have a copy? Do you need to register it there? And there's so many different things. So again, just making sure that you know that process. Voting, if you want to vote in the United States, what does that process look like? So there are different, every state is different. And that's one of the frustrating things about voting across, just not to get political, but it is just frustrating. And even across the state of Texas, every county has a different absentee voting situation. So you really need to figure out like where you're registered to vote and then how to vote if you want to. There are like voters abroad or Democrats abroad or Republicans internationally, different organizations that will help you. There's the FVAP, I think, the Federal Voter Assistance Program that will also help you. Anyway, there's lots of programs. Obviously, with 8 million people across the world, it's probably a good thing that there are enough their support to help us vote. And so it's just figuring that out. It's not, for me specifically, I haven't found it to be the easiest. I have to contact my county person and then have her email me something. Then I have to print it and make sure that it is completely perfectly printed. And then I fill it out and I have to put it in an envelope and address it to her, but it needs to have US stamps. So the only way I can do that is if I send it with someone who is willing to then go to the post office for me and, get the stamps. And so that's kind of frustrating, but it is what it is. There is the STEP program, which I highly suggest, even if you are traveling outside the United States and you are just traveling, but also if you're living, to sign up for the STEP program. The STEP program is a program that basically registers you in that country. So if there was some sort of catastrophe, they would know that you are in that country and be able to track you. It is a very important program, but it also helpful because like I get emails and they'll tell me like, oh, hey, there's this huge weather storm coming across the country. So, everyone beware that we are going to have flooding and, maybe some catastrophic events. Or, there might be, some rioting or something. And so they will tell us. So I highly suggest registering that again, even if you are traveling internationally. And then also just traveling in and out of the country. So, where thinking about like traveling back and forth to your country of origin or where you're traveling around, just how easy is that? Is that something that you even desire to do, or do you just want to like move there and never leave? And just really considering like how that travel situation is going to go and how easy or difficult it could be. And then, of course, just out with the old and in with the new. So figuring out what to do with all your stuff. So, selling your things, storing them, you know, whether you store them with family or friends, whether you have a paid storage unit, just something along those lines of, like, are you going to keep some things? I mean, everybody likes to keep like mementos at least, and maybe like some family valuables. So where is that going to go? With the selling aspect, you can do that on your own. Obviously have garage sales and Facebook Marketplace, etc. Or you could even use like an estate sale company that will come in, and basically you take out whatever you want to keep, and then they just sell everything else. Of course, you could just give everything away with you. You can obviously pack up things. I've known people to move here and they have brought like 10, 15 suitcases or boxes full of things. The other thing is you could ship it. So there are shipping companies that will, depending on what you want to, how big, how much you want to ship, you can ship a whole storage container full of things or a half a container. And it just depends again on what the import is with that country, if that's allowable, and how much you can bring in, etc. And of course, like when you're in this country, how are you going to get things? So, in where I live in Costa Rica and most of all over the country, a lot of the places that you rent are actually furnished. So you don't really need to have furniture if you don't want to. So that's nice. But there's a lot of other like kitchen stuff and, just household things that you sometimes are used to. So buying them or shipping them, again, like I said, shipping things over either through mail service or um, when you're traveling in and out of the country, and then buying new and used just like you would in the US. And then asking people like, hey, does anybody have this? Like on, Facebook groups. Again, going back to those Facebook groups and the sense of community, just asking people, does anybody have this that they're not using? Can I have it? And then muling. So muling is basically like, hey, oh, you're going back to the US. Can I send you, these three things and you bring them back for me, please? That's like a typical thing here, especially, is doing that. And there's actually Facebook groups where people will post and be like, hey, I'm going to the States, anybody need me to send me anything, let me know. And then other people will actually pay, ask you to pay for it. So they'll be like, okay, I charge like $15 a pound or something like that. So there's lots of ways to get things, but also just think about like, do you really need all those things? Just making sure that you might not need everything that you think you need. So again, like I mentioned on timing, my timing was basically 2 months, but I've also known families that have spent years and years and years trying to decide where in Costa Rica to live. They moved here, and within a year, they moved back to their home country of Canada. So everybody's timing's different, right? But like there's really no perfect timing to move or way to do this. It's just however you create it. And the big thing is that you just do it for whatever feels comfortable for you. And then this is my like little mission for you when you travel, remember that a foreign country is not designed to make you comfortable. It is designed to make its own people comfortable. And this is a quote by Clifton Fetterman. And the other quote, the best way to travel abroad is to live with the locals. So I want to remind you as well that you are moving to a foreign country. And this country has been in existence for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And they have their own culture and they have their own ways of doing things. And yes, you might have experienced something better. The United States might have something better. There might be a system, but that's not how it's done in that new country. and just please be cognizant of that and be aware of that, that like you are actually coming to them and, living in their country. And so trying to change their country, trying to change the way they do things is, somewhat disrespectful sometimes, and doesn't show the quality of like, hey, I am wanting to live here to better my life, in that way. So just keep that in mind as you, are traveling as well as living in a new place, is that every place does something different. The way they might do things is just a little bit different. And that's not to say that once you buddy up to a business owner or a politician or something, you couldn't, suggest this. But we definitely see a lot in Facebook groups, et cetera, that people just start to, oh, they should do this and they should do this and they should do this. And it's like, but this is their country, so just keep that in mind. And that brings me to another thing. What exactly are we? So when we move into another country, and I used a couple of these different words through our talk. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of times, North Americans, especially, we call ourselves expats. But that is not necessarily like that kind of isn't an elitism sort of thing, because we are foreigners. We are immigrants into a new country, and we are immigrants out of our own country. So immigrants with an I is basically the people that move into the country. And the country that they moved from is talking about they're moving, they immigrated from that. They're immigrants with an E from that country. So when you move to a different country, you're actually both, which is really kind of cool. Of course, every country or every kind of area around the world has different words for different types of people. So here in Central and South America, a lot of North Americans are called gringos. But even that is, not, it's putting some derogatory kind of connotation on that word. And so is aliens, of course. And so, really, as you navigate, thinking about moving into another country, just think about how you have already thought about people moving into your country. And then just now realizing that you are now that person moving into a new country, and maybe opening up your mindset a little bit on how conversations and how terminology really does make a difference. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my process, just a little bit more so that you can kind of understand. I guess I did a little bit in the beginning, but again, it was my family of four. And my husband came home at the end of July, and 3 days later, we had the first sale sign in in our front yard. And 2 months later, we moved here, and we sold our house, both of our cars, and all of our stuff. So we basically divided all of our stuff into sale and storage units. So we have a storage unit with some personal items, and then we moved here with 5 suitcases, 4 carry-ons, 4 backpacks, and 1 car seat bag that also had a bunch of stuff stuffed in it. Um, and we actually moved here during a hurricane, so it took us an extra week. So we had to end up staying in hotels and friends' houses during that time. It's kind of crazy and chaotic, just added to our story of crazy, crazy thing. And then, like I said, in 2020, during the pandemic, at the end of the pandemic, my husband and I decided to separate and get a divorce. And so we are now in 2 separate homes, and but still in the same city, and co-parenting like amazing badasses, if I may say so, and doing a great job. And we have more stuff in some respects, but we also gave up so much as well in this 7-year process, not only in the 2 months process of moving here, but in these 7 years as well. And it's been a very beautiful journey, and nothing is taken for granted. I showed you those sunset pictures. I make sure that I go see the sunset 3 to 4 times a week. As long as it's not during rainy season and it's not raining, and try to go walk on the beach multiple times a week as well, because it is that important to me to not take this life for granted, not take that this is a choice. I chose to do this, and I'm choosing continuously to live here. Um, and I hope that gives you some inspiration, that if you decide to move, that also gives you a place of understanding of like, this is what I want. And I want to also make sure that I, have the life that I want and desire, through my reasonings and through picking out the place and moving there with integrity. So again, here is all the sources that I said. And this very last one here, this Howler Magazine, What to Expect article here, it actually is an article that I wrote. And it's a great article. It just kind of gives you some basis of like kind of what I was talking about earlier, of just living in the moment and being present and really appreciating where your new environment is. So at this point, I'm going to stop for questions. If there are any questions, I'm going to stop the recording and then I'll come back and answer any, just so that those that are on the call don't feel like they have to be on camera the whole time. And yes, this is a couple of the other experiences my family's had here. We got to see the turtles hatching, and then about 6 months later, we went back and I'm sorry, lay the eggs. And then 6 weeks later, we went back and we got to see the little turtles coming out of the sand. It's one of the most amazing, beautiful things I've ever experienced, that I never knew was a bucket list item until it was actually happening. Both of those events of just seeing hundreds of these large, gigantic turtles like digging these nests and laying eggs, and then seeing all thousands and thousands and thousands of these baby turtles struggling for their life to go into the ocean. And then, of course, here's just a regular day, dropping my kids off at school or an activity where there's just cows in the road. Okay, so I am going to uh, stop the recording. Let's see here. Stop share.